Good morning, everyone, and welcome to the first of two sessions today. My name is Matt Tomlinson. I'm with Eagle's Environmental Support Division. I want to welcome you to the Primacy MiSTAR Operator Training Part 1 session. And before we get started, I am going to take you through a few housekeeping slides, and we'll turn it over to our presenter after that. So just want to remind everybody, if you haven't participated in these sessions before, that all lines are muted during the webinar. We are recording this webinar and you will receive a follow-up communication from us, and that'll have the recording link. So you'll have the ability to go back through and view that at your own pace if you missed something or want to share this link with another individual or group. And there's a couple of ways that you can ask questions. So you can do that by using the Q&A dialog box, which is located on your Zoom toolbar. You just open that up and submit your question, and we'll address those questions at appropriate breaks. You can also use the raised hand icon, the little hand on your toolbar, and that'll let us know that you would like to make a live comment, and we can unmute your mic and let you share your question that way. And then it looks like we do have some people calling in on the phone. So if you are calling in on the phone, there is an option for you to hit #2. And that will indicate to us that you have a raised hand, and we can unmute your phone and let you participate that way. So with that, I am going to turn this over to our presenter, our kickoff presenter, Jason Malow with the Oil, Gas, and Minerals Division. So Jason, if you want to come on, and I'll stop sharing my screen, and then we can get your slides up. I'll let you know when we see those. So you're in slideshow mode. Go ahead, take it away. I'm just going to mute my audio, video, and monitor the background.
Okay, well, thank you everyone for joining. As Matt said, we're having two Primacy and MiSTAR informational/training sessions, and this is part one. Part one will focus on kind of setting the tone, what primacy means, what changes are going to come into play, going over the part 615 rules that kick in as a function of primacy taking over on August 29th. And introducing our MiSTAR system, which is our electronic paperless reporting system for injection data. Day 2 will be tomorrow from 1 to 3 Eastern time, and that's going to focus on really how to use MiSTAR, click by click. How do I actually, now I know the requirements, I'm aware of this system, I've signed up and got all my credentials to get in there. Now, how do I actually go about submitting my reports? I do want to just point out, I put my name on here. For those of you who don't know me, I'm Jason Mayu. I joined Oil, Gas, and Minerals Division pushing about 1.5 years ago. But there's obviously been just tons of people involved in this primacy process, and I'm not going to dare try and name everyone because invariably I would miss someone. But there's been stakeholders, industry partners, lots and lots of folks from OGMD and Eagle. And it's been a long process, but I did want to put my name out here. So if someone is viewing this at a later date, I've viewed many a presentation where say who's speaking and how do I get a hold of them and when is this presentation from? So 5 years down the road, maybe not all the information is exactly the same. So I just wanted to make sure I have that out there. Thank you to everyone who is able to join today. We put a notice out in the Michigan Oil and Gas News. I sent out an email blast to the Eagle folks, as well as to Class II operators where we had email addresses for. I'm sure not everyone was able to make today's session and tomorrow's. I know it was a little bit short notice, but we wanted to make sure we got something out there for everybody before the assumption of primacy. These sessions, as Matt said, are recorded. They will be posted out on the website. And I've got a contacts list in here for people if there are further questions, comments, etc. If we're getting feedback where not a lot of people, a huge amount of people weren't able to make it and are interested, we can definitely work on hosting another one of these post primacy, but wanted to make sure we got something out there before we took over here. There we go. And with that, I'm actually going to turn it over to Adam Wygant, our Oil, Gas, and Minerals Division Director, who I'm sure most of you know. He also serves as the state geologist, for some opening remarks about Class II primacy. Thank you.
Thanks, Jason. I just want to welcome everybody today and thank you for taking the time. This is mostly directed at industry as a refresher today. And I think we've got a good program lined up as well as a session tomorrow. But we've also invited our Oil, Gas, and Minerals Division team. I think it'll be helpful to level set with everybody and any other partners or visitors that we may have on this webinar. I would like to acknowledge this has been a long road. I was reviewing timelines, and I have, I think, my first email with Hal Fitch, the former director, asking me to pull together information on what it would take to pursue primacy. And when I started doing that, I found about 2 or 3 other times that Michigan had taken a look at this, including the original time frame in that 82, 83 time frame, and I think again in the early 90s and again in the early 2000s. So it was interesting to see this contemplated multiple times. On September 20th of that year, in 2013, Hal requested of Rebecca Harvey with Region 5 to appoint a resource on the EPA side to liaison with Michigan, and appointed me to be the Michigan liaison. From that, we began to work as a team. As Jason said, there's numerous people that helped out with that. And I'll acknowledge some of those people, even though I probably forget some here in a second. But moving through the timeline in 2014, November, we had a pretty good draft of the program description. And on December 9th of 2014, we had our first public hearing on primacy. We had a first set of rules that was related to hydraulic fracturing primarily, but already we were kind of thinking about primacy down the road, thinking about things with like electronic submission of documents. We were also thinking about our traditional freshwater definition and how that might be different in the context of hydraulic fracturing as used in additives. I think that was our first kind of inclination that we may have to do some work there. In 2015, we were working with our Oil and Gas Advisory Committee on a supervisor of wells instruction. At that point, we thought maybe the additional detail that we would need could maybe come in the form of a supervisor of wells instruction. But I think by that same time frame, enough working with EPA, we realized that Michigan would have to do a fairly substantial rules development. And so we had rule set 2017-17, which created additional concepts of this Part 8 rules that we'll spend a fair amount of time in today, putting additional requirements and clarity around underground injection in Michigan, so that we could indeed improve or prove that we have an equally effective program. Because at the end of the day, that's what primacy is that for a state to have primary authority, act as the Class II administrator, that we have equally effective protection of underground sources of drinking water in Class II UIC. We had that substantial rule set passed. I noticed that Tricia Hagerman mailed out our first application for primacy to the EPA on September 24th, 2018, so 4 years ago. I think we identified an issue around primarily the definition of fresh water, which was sort of our first intent, was to kind of clarify that, clear back in the hydraulic fracturing rules. But we did believe, in talking with our AG and the EPA, that we needed additional work. So rule set 2019-001 was launched, and we did that. So effectively, I think, we've had two major UIC related rulemakings in this process, and one that sort of touched on it. I noticed, as I mentioned, we had so many people to mention, but I do think an 8-year project, which has been like a quarter to a third of my career project, bears recognizing some people. And I will say that, Hal Fitch initiated this, had the thought this was something that we should do here in Michigan, but Larry Organic's really been working alongside of me through this 8-year process and put in an amazing amount of hours. Joe Victory, who's no longer with our group, Sochi Levin with the Department of Attorney General, Mike Sweat, Mark Snow, Rick Henderson, Dina Lawrence, our former senior administrative assistant, Tricia, our new one. The Groundwater Protection Council has been a good partner. We had Mike Nicholas and Bob Van Voorhees assist us with the original crosswalks to make sure that we were equally effective with the Safe Drinking Water Act, and then also our Oil and Gas Advisory Committee and MOGA through that committee worked with us through each of these rulemakings and details. We've had some environmental NGOs engaged at different points of this process, and all that brings us to the point where we are 7 days from primacy. It seems a little surreal. Last year we didn't hear a whole lot from August, or from July to sort of July this year, and we began to get an indication from EPA that things were sort of moving through the headquarters approvals. So our first sort of indication that we may be on a path to approval, and an expedited approval, sort of things would come at us pretty quickly, were last month in July. And so I challenged our team to start thinking about things in a primacy date plus 30-day kind of scenario, because we knew that from the date of Federal Register posting, we would have primacy 30 days later. So last month, when I think it was the 28th, the federal posting came out, our team knew that they had 30 days to stand this up. And our intent was to have this meeting ahead of time. So as Jason said, it would be a good level set and reminder of the ground we've covered with these 3 different rulemakings, and we'll just get off on a good foot. The other thing is in terms of acknowledgement, Carrie Johnson and others on our team have worked over the last probably year and a half on an IT system. It's a module to our current Rbdms system. We call it MiSTAR, UIC module. We had wanted to set about creating a new IT platform that would basically allow us as a state to manage the data associated with 1,300 Class II injection wells from sort of A to Z, and that it would be the go-to place for reporting and notifications, and give us the ability to respond to EPA at the end of the year when we have to submit our required reports. And you'll hear a fair amount about that today, but then in detail tomorrow. So why did we go after primacy? I think about it in 3 different ways. Wanted to provide a single regulatory process that would be less confusing, provide more regulatory certainty, and be more efficient by eliminating duplicate regulation. Just makes sense. Number two, our geologists live, work, and play in the areas that they regulate. So they have a direct connection to the air, land, water, and people. We think that that's a big benefit to our citizens. You know, they're neighbors, they're in their communities. And lastly, we have almost 30 geologists working on these injection wells, and we have been doing so alongside of EPA since 1983. I just feel like this team of geologists is very unique in terms of knowing Michigan's deep bedrock geology, their surface water resources, groundwater resources, and so that continuing that body of knowledge and also having that situated around Michigan, I think is just an advantage, frankly, over geologists and program managers that may sit at Region 5 in EPA. We've appreciated the working relationship alongside of them, but those are the reasons why I believe that primacy was a good idea and is coming next week. So a big reason why I think primacy is good too, especially coming off an 8-year process with multiple rulemakings, lots of collaboration on pulling things together. We have a great program. All of these years of preparation for the 29th next week has made Oil, Gas, and Minerals Division a better agency, got a better rule set, better policy, all of that for protection of underground sources of drinking water. So I want to conclude my remarks just on expectations. This is about protection of underground sources of drinking water. And I believe, as I've said, that Michigan's program now is not just equally effective. I think it's potentially more effective than even the federal government's, because we've just spent so much time considering policies and things that EPA may have only had in policy, we now have in rule. So I think we've got a fair, tough, but predictable rule set here, and we expect compliance with it. Because ultimately we have to have protection of these groundwater resources. The change here is that we oversee the industry, regulate the industry with Part 615, and EPA regulates us now. So you won't have that direct involvement with the EPA if you don't have wells that are on Indian lands, or Jason will explain some of the wells will be retained for a time that are in active enforcement. So Safe Drinking Water Act doesn't go away. The EPA will review our program probably on an annual basis and see how we're doing. They'll pour through our records, much like an auditor would, just to ensure that we're doing what we said we were going to do in our various rulemakings in our program description. Primacy is not in a relaxation of rules, protections, or expectations. We still have, we may have some slightly different tools in our toolbox for regulatory compliance and enforcement than the EPA does, but we come into this date next week with high expectations for protection and for compliance with our regulations. With that expectation, I'm asking the industry really coordinate with us and help us help you in the area of regulatory compliance. There's notification requirements that you'll learn about today, MIT requirements, and all those things are going to take a lot of coordination between our division and the regulated industries out there. We have tight time frames on some of these notifications, so we're just asking that, like you've had to coordinate with the EPA in past, that you think about your schedules for those kind of works like mechanical integrity tests, so that we can streamline our schedules to witness as many of those as we can. And then if we're more efficient in those kind of ways, then we'll be able to have more flexibility to address some of the emergencies that come up on your end as well. Finally, my expectation is that you use the UIC MiSTAR system. We've made a significant investment in IT, and I know that's a big change management piece. We've tried to create a system that works for operators that may have only 1 to 6 wells. So you can reasonably get acquainted with the system, go in and do your monthly injection reporting. But we've also created a system that if you own hundreds of injection wells, that you'll be able to set up systems pretty simply, I think, to download your monthly reports. So anybody that's got maybe a dozen to hundreds of injection wells, I think we've got a good system for you. We have, you're going to have to get used to making notifications of loss of mechanical integrity and other required notifications through that system. So it'll take us all a little bit of getting used to that. But the importance of that system is to move us out of the data entry business, and also to have an IT system, a system of record that allows us to populate those reports that are required to EPA on an annual basis, where they oversee our program. So I want to conclude my remarks and just say thank you. It's really exciting. I think I'm still slightly shell-shocked. The 8 years is all built to this. I think the timing's right. You know, we're just now going live with our UIC system, MiSTAR system. So even though it's been a long haul, like I said, we're a better agency. We got a better set of regulations, and the timing's just right. So thank you, and I hope you enjoy the training that our teams put together for you.
All right, thank you very much, Adam. I think we can be good, right? With that, so to kind of walk us through, so Adam did a great job without slides. I have lots and lots of slides. You know, ultimately my hope is that a lot of this people say, yep, I knew that, and I was aware of it. But for those who don't, I think it's good to run through where we stand today, kind of current status, what's going to change in a week when primacy kicks in for Class II wells. You know, if I have questions, issues, comments, problems, who do I need to talk to? That's always a big one for me. Who do I reach out to? We're going to spend a fair bit of time going over the Part 615 administrative rules. As Adam talked about, there have been a couple different rule makings, and if you haven't gone, you know, permitted a well or changed something here in the last couple of years, there might be some things that are new or different. Also, there's several rules that kick in on the data primacy. And finally, we'll touch on the MiSTAR system, which Adam has also talked about. I've already talked about on the first slide. And again, that's going to be kind of a broad overview. What is it? How do I get access to it? And then tomorrow, we'll go through for, I guess, you know, anyone who's interested, but particularly the folks hopefully who will be using MiSTAR to go through and say, this is how I do an MIT notification. This is how I do a monthly injection report and get that underway. So I'm going to violate a couple things that I don't like to do. I don't like slides that only have words on them usually. I also don't like reading slides at people. And there are a couple occasions where I'll do that. And it's usually because it's very specific language and I didn't want to get it incorrect. So Adam has already talked about this. So what is, you know, that's one of the main questions we get. We get so in the, been in this, I've been in this for probably one of the shortest periods of time, but for folks who've been around it a long time, you say, what is primacy? Well, primacy is the primary authority and enforcement responsibility for UIC under the Safe Drinking Water Act. And Michigan, through the approval, has demonstrated that its Class II program will be equally effective. I put 1425, that's the equally effective, as opposed to adopting everything wholesale. And this is important, and this is a thing you've heard a few times already, and you will hear repeatedly. Ensuring that underground injection activities do not endanger underground sources of drinking water. That's the whole crux of the program. So current status, last I checked, it is August 22nd, which means the EPA still has primacy for all class 2 wells in the state of Michigan until August 29th. So one more week here. If you have reporting, we've had dual regulated system and dual reporting for most things, and that's going to continue through the end of August. So you'll still actually owe your injection reports for August back to the EPA in September. And I highlighted this. This is a web address, or pardon me, an email address that if you don't have it, it's a good one to know. This is an inbox for the state of Michigan regulatory requirements. That's where we've been since, I believe, 2019 receiving these. And I'll show on the next slide, there was a letter outlining that. That's still a place. We're going to keep that live. There's 5 or 6 people who can go in there and grab things and answer questions. So if someone's on vacation or you're trying to get a hold of a broad group, it's a good email address to have in your back pocket. So what am I referring to? This is the February 19th, 2019 letter. Hopefully it looks familiar. It's in my opinion, a really good letter that outlines all the reporting requirements for the state of Michigan in a dual regulated system, which is the EPA having primacy and still having dual regulation and dual reporting to the state of Michigan. And dominantly, it's laying out, where do I let people know if I have a loss of mechanical integrity or a notification of mechanical integrity test? Where do I put my results, my monthly reports, my inject data analysis? And the answer is it can pretty much all go to that, inbox, or some of the notifications can be made by phone. This is my probably #1 most attached attachment for emails. I send this out quite frequently because sometimes things come in kind of the side door, just as a reminder. So this is still in effect, right? This is still in effect till next week. And even we'll talk about what happens beyond that. So the path forward in primacy. So on August 29th, Michigan will assume primacy for class 2 wells in Michigan, except for, as Adam said, wells in Indian country and wells, this is one I will read, with ongoing enforcement actions by the EPA until resolution of the action as determined by the EPA. So we've had bi-weekly meetings typically with the EPA over the last, I don't know how long they started before I was on, but they've been going at least for the last 1.5 years that I've been involved in. And my understanding from the EPA is that they will reach out to operators specifically. There's one operator where the first provision applies, and they will be reaching out on the 29th, either by email or phone. And then the enforcement and compliance group will be reaching out to everybody else who has those ongoing actions. We will be CC'd on that, and we'll get a list of that, of all those wells as well. We don't have that. I've been CC'd on all those compliance communications for at least the last year. Maybe you've seen my name that way. But we're waiting, we're waiting until the end. So this is going to come in on probably on the 29th and out to the 29th for everyone, because again, the EPA still has primacy. There could be enforcement actions opened in the next week, and there could be enforcement actions closed in the next week. So a week-old list could potentially be significantly out of date. If you want to go out and read, you can go out to the Federal Register about the UIC Michigan approval. Also, if you have interest in looking at it, there's the EPA response to comments. So they distilled it down to five comments and responses. It spans about 9 or 10 pages. It's a pretty good read. So this is a map that I'd say probably everybody is familiar with, and apologies to the UP, but we don't have we didn't have the Class II wells up there. So again, I've said it a few times. My name's Jason Mayu. I came on as the supervisor of the gas storage and underground injection control unit. Larry Organic is the engineer in this group, and has been extensively involved in running the Class II program on the Michigan side of things, and will continue to do so. We also have 3 new positions that came about in relation to primacy. So Eric Kimber, Ben Hinks, and Cody Whithorn are geology specialists, and it's Ben will be covering Gaylord and Cadillac up here. Cody will be covering the Saginaw Bay region, and Eric Kimber gets this big slice of the state down here, Kalamazoo, Lansing, Southeast Michigan. Now, that's not to say that these folks are the only folks you can reach out to. They're going to be the ones picking up notifications in MiSTAR, doing a lot of MIT witnessing, doing a lot of coordination, but please, please, please do not forget about your friendly neighborhood area geologist. Those folks are UIC inspectors as well. They're going to be doing a great deal of all the primary work, still doing lease inspections, still doing work related to Class II wells. It's just that we have another level, another position as well, to help with questions, issues, and all things UIC. We also have, as questions may arise for either permitting or bonding, we also have the permitting and bonding unit, which I think most folks are familiar with. There's been a couple, there's a new face, couple changes, but Kevin Carey is the unit supervisor. Jennifer Farragon is the bond specialist. We have 2 permit coordinators, Ashley Neal and Kevin Cecil. Those are going to be, those are excellent folks and excellent folks to reach out to regarding if you have questions around permitting or bonding. So we have quite a few contacts, and I do want to emphasize that doesn't mean that you're not going to contact other people. Like I said, you have the area geologists, you have district supervisors, you have field operations supervisor, PTSS supervisor, you have Adam. We have lots and lots of people, but if you want to get, you know, this was kind of a list of getting some primary contacts out to you. And this is all available on our webpage. So I want to jump into the 615 administrative rules portion of the program here. So part 8 covers injection wells. Again, Adam walked you through the different rule makings, and I'm going to walk through as best I can to go through what changes have occurred, what's new, what's different. And some of it isn't different, right? We have rules that are in effect now. If you've done anything with an injection well in the last couple of years, there's rules that are already in effect in part 8, and you've probably already done them. There's one rule, I say rules, but there's one rule with subparts that applies specifically to the primacy transition, and that's where we'll kick off. And then there's a handful of rules or sub rules that are really, that specifically denote that they're only effective upon the date of primacy. So those rules will go into effect on August 29th. So as I said, 814, we have the Class II primacy transitional requirements. And there's 2 parts to this. There's the supervisor requirements, so basically OGMD and state of Michigan requirements, and then there's an owner operator requirement that I have on the next slide. So upon the date of primacy, supervisor shall, sorry, that lags, accept all Class II well permits, including rule authorized wells issued under the EPA. So we have from the EPA scanned permit sections. So we have, we basically have the EPA permits in hand with a couple exceptions. We're expecting one more tranche of permit scans in the next week prior to primacy, and then we'll have all of them. So if there's any double checking, any questions, we can always refer back to those. If there's something even beyond that, the EPA will still retain those permits, and those can always be discussed with them as well. I mean, in terms of if we need any clarifications. So we're going to accept the permits, but if you're permitted under 615, your 615 permit becomes your permit. That's so again, going from a dual to a single, you have one permit in effect. We're going to accept the records from the US EPA for Class II wells. Again, we've received some data from them. We've received scans. We've received some data. We're going to get some more kind of a deluge of information here on the 28th and 29th regarding Class II wells. So we have the very most up-to-date information. Like I said, if there's any MITs that occur this week, then we want to make sure we have the correct last MIT date. We're going to accept the MIPs, the maximum injection pressures from the permits. Again, we have those to refer back to, and eventually we'll get all those in MiSTAR. And again, we'll accept the mechanical and test data and test schedules. So we're not going to say, hey, primacy is happening, everyone go out and do an MIT. No, we're going to stick to the schedule. So the 5-year requirement, unless you lose mechanical integrity. So nothing too out there on that, just kind of a way to merge the two programs. For the owner operator side of things, there's really only one additional requirement, and this is probably a pretty narrow case. So if you've applied with the EPA for a Class II permit, but you don't have that permit and you haven't applied with the state of Michigan for a 615 permit, you're going to need to apply for a permit under 615. Applications in process with the EPA, you'll need to transfer those and apply for your 615. If you've applied for both and they're both in process, then your 615 permit will take over and that one will continue through the process under the rules. And of course, you need a conformance bond if you have a new well and don't have a blanket bond or some other instrument in place. So that's why I put out permitting and bonding contacts for everyone. So I'm kind of starting at the end and then we'll loop back to the beginning. So we started at 814 because that is specific to the transition. And then we'll loop back. So we'll finish up with 815 and then kick back and go through a little bit of the process and how everything will work. So this is one that is about 815 is about permit modifications. And a lot of this language, and you will hear this if you take away a couple different things, you'll hear protection of underground sources of drinking water, and you'll hear you're accustomed to this. This is similar or the same as the EPA. So in these rulemakings, one of them was to define and determine major versus minor modifications of permits. And number 2 here defines the minor modifications. So you can correct typos. We can change the reporting to more frequent. You can change an interim compliance date. If you change ownership, sell a well where there's no, where the supervisor is determining there's no change in permit. Changing quantities or types of fluids within the capacity of the fluid with the, the facility as permitted, again, in the judgment of the supervisor. Changes in construction requirements approved by the supervisor, including remedial cementing or adding perforations, or amendment of a plugging and abandonment plan. And then obviously you see that this rule goes into effect starting on the 29th. And I list those all out and I go through them because it's as simple as if it's not a minor modification, it's then a major modification. If it's a major modification, part 1 of this, subpart 1 routes you through 802 and 803. So permitting and public notice, which we'll loop back through and start over. So if you take away, if it's not defined, if it's not minor, it's a major modification. Because as you said, you know, I think some people will want to change things, and this will be a very important rule to that. So I will spare you 801. I will spare you. I will not read you definitions. I trust everyone can go out there and read definitions for themselves. 802, I have several slides on it, but I'm going to go over it kind of very much in brief. 803 is Class II well notification, public comment, public hearing. Again, I tried to distill that one down to one rule screen cap and then a little bit of a decision tree, just to try and keep it a little bit moving, keep it high level. Again, I trust everyone can go in and read the rules, and we're happy to answer questions. So 802, pardon me, it's an application for a permit to drill, convert, and operate an injection well. So these are requirements above and beyond 201. Again, if you have applied for a permit since these rules came into effect, you have gone through this. You're already doing 802. This is not new. These requirements for injection wells are not new related to primacy. So name and address of basically permittees within the quarter-mile radius, surface owners within the quarter-mile radius, and a plat with some explicit details on what needs to go on that plat. Again, kind of zooming through. And if a well is proposed to be converted, you have to submit a completion report, a written geologic description. So basically going over what is required for additionally for conversion, and plugging records of all abandoned, wells, casing, sealing, completion within 1320, and a plan for those wells if there's inadequate plugging. Again, to the last line, to prevent proposed injected fluids from migrating into an underground source of drinking water through inadequately plugged seals or completed wells. And we just have two more here. So this is a long and important rule. Schematic diagram that shows pretty much all the parameters of the geology in the wellbore. Again, highlighting tops of USDWs. And for Class II wells, also information about pretty much the operating conditions of the well. So anticipated injection rate, fluids to be injected, maximum anticipated injection pressure, fluid analysis, geologic time. There's special provisions here in H if it's going into an oil or gas pool to notify offset operators, identification of faults, features, plugin and banding, and again, finally, information on construction that demonstrates it'll prevent movement. I know I really flew through that, but it's not a new rule. It's been in place. If you have questions, happy to answer them, or happy to refer you over to our permitting experts on that as well. However, 803, while it's been out there for everyone to read, this is a rule that comes into effect on the date of primacy. So on August 29th, 803 will be new for us. It won't be really new for operators. This is, again, you'll hear me say more than once, it's a process that you've gone through with the EPA in terms of notification and public comment, but because we are assuming primacy, this is part of the equal effectiveness. So the provisions of this rule are only effect on the date of primacy and basically applies to any injection well that requires a new permit. So that's new wells, conversions, major modifications, anything to that effect. So I put this out so you can read it. I won't read it all to you, but you'll see a lot of that information from 802 is then utilized in 803. So within 10 days after receipt of a Class II well permit, the supervisor will notice each surface owner and well permittee within 1,320 feet, quarter mile, to the township supervisor, municipal manager, well, the well's located, and we have a new part on our website, or I shouldn't say a new part. We'll have an addition on our website. If you happen to go out and grab the weekly permit list, it'll be right there, right with the weekly permit list on our website for notifications. So again, pulling from the previous, we'll have the date, the applicant, the name and address, the proposed well, the geologic formation, and then operational parameters, injection pressure, daily injection rate, how to submit, and then information on how to submit comments. And basically any comments must be received within 30 days from the date of the notification. So what I did is I made an attempt here to make a decision tree or a flow chart, however you want to view it, of the rest of Rule 803. And if I will caveat this, if I went over this very carefully, but if I mistyped and I typed 20 instead of 10 or something like that, the rule is what applies, not the PowerPoint slide, but I think it is all, I've proofed it a few times here. So the rest of Rule 803 says, all right, we saw in the last slide, we'll make that notice within 10 days. And then you read this, comments or objections within 30 days. If there are, go to this leg. If there are no comments, go down here. So if you notice the well, no comments, jump down here and your permit's issued within 10 days. And you can do the math, 10, 30, 10, maximum of 50 days there. If there are comments, you jump up to this leg here and we have 10 days to determine the validity of the comments. And the rule specifically defines valid comments related to waste, public health, or safety. If there is not a valid comment, we're going to jump down again and say that we'll issue that permit then within 20 days. If there is a valid comment, it goes public hearing and notice within 20 days and hold a public hearing within 30 days. And that will be held, I don't have the rule right in front of me, but it'll be held within, I believe, the township or county that the well is being drilled in. Finally, after the public hearing, if we go up this leg and we go to the public hearing, I didn't type all this out, but I will kind of read this on the side. If the conditions of 803D, I through III are met, so that's the application complies with the requirements of the rules, the method of injection proposed in the application complies with the law, and the proposed method of injection will not threaten public health, safety, and will not create waste or endanger an underground source of drinking water. Then it goes to approve the permit within 30 days and we'll post the response to public comments. Again, that will be posted on our website. And in the instance of no, the conditions of this 803D, I through III are not met, we have a similar path where we'll then deny the permit and also post the public comments on our website. So you can see there is a difference between the two timelines. Depending on how all the path plays out, but still required and important for public comment, public notice. So I've said we start at the end and we'll go at the beginning, so that we went through 802, 803. 804 has just 3 provisions that are subrules 1, 3, and 5 apply after primacy or upon the date of primacy, but do not apply to existing Class II wells or rule authorized wells. So if you have a new well or a conversion, you have to look at this. And really this is, I will spare you, I won't read you the whole thing here. But really what this is about is demonstration of external mechanical integrity. Excuse me. And that can be demonstrated several different ways: a temperature log, noise log, cement bond log, cementing records, or other methods that are suggested by the permittee and subsequently approved by the supervisor, authorized representative of the supervisor. Also parts 5 and 6 here, sub rules 5 and 6 here. So it's about where your surface casing is set. So surface casing must be set a minimum of 100 feet below the base of glacial drift and into competent bedrock, or 100 feet below all underground sources of drinking water, whichever is deeper. If you're converting a well where the surface casing is not 100 feet below USDW, you need to demonstrate that the casing and cement is shown to protect underground sources of drinking water. Finally, subpart 6, injection casing must have a minimum of 250 feet of cement immediately above the injection interval. If you have less than 250 feet, you may have to do some remedial cementing as determined by the supervisor. This one, again, since we're going in order, we'll go super quickly. It's a short one that you can have potentially temporary authority to inject for up to 30 days for a limited purpose of running an injectivity test. Again, as long as there will be no endangerment of underground sources of drinking water. And if you're a gas storage operator, you are exempt from this rule. All right, into some MITs. Rule 806 is regarding testing and authorization to inject before operation of Class II injection wells. So before you start a new injection well, you have to run an MIT at a pressure of at least 300 PSIG, and you need to have at least 100-pound difference between in testing pressure and tubing pressure, and the pressure change can't be more than 5% over 30 minutes. This is one where you do see a very slight difference between the EPA rule and the Michigan rule of 3% versus 5%. Continuing with that, we need an MIT, the rules require an MIT notification at least 5 days in advance. Under the EPA, that was a 30-day notification. And that's one of the requirements where if you know it ahead of time and you can, and you're potentially, let's just in the hypothetical doing 5-year MITs, and you can group a bunch of them and you have it all planned out, and you have more than 5 days of notification, giving us as much notice as you can on that so we can plan and have someone out there and do as little rescheduling as possible would be appreciated. Within 14 days of the test, we need an MIT report. Those will come in through MiSTAR. We'll talk about that, as will the notifications. I've got a couple slides on that later. And this is an important point. Again, this is not different from how the EPA is running things under primacy, but the letter will come from a different place. So before you start injection, you'll need an authorization to inject letter. And this time it'll be coming from the state of Michigan rather than the EPA. So just a permit to drill a new Class II well is not equivalent to an authorization to inject. So while we're on that, a note on authorization to inject, cease injection, or ATI-CI. Finally got a picture in here, but all Class II wells are under either an authorization to inject or a cease injection at all times. It is a light switch, it is binary, it's authorization to inject or cease injection. People are probably getting tired of hearing me saying this, but there's no dimmer switch, there's no in between. It's on or it's off, and you get a letter in both cases. After primacy, after the 29th, there will be folks out there who have an active cease injection letter from the EPA. That's another piece of data we'll be getting from them right up towards the 28th or 29th. We'll get a list from them, and you'll need an ATI from the state of Michigan, from Oil, Gas, Minerals Division after a successful MIT. So those carry over through primacy. They don't cancel out. We'll have a list of them. So that's a very, I think, a very important fact. And I've already mentioned for Class II well, permit isn't an ATI. You still need to do your MIT and submit your successful test. Again, one that is very, very similar to the EPA is maximum injection pressure. There's a formula for it. Maximum injection pressure is fracture pressure gradient minus 433, approximately hydrostatic, times your specific gravity, all multiplied by your depth. So I've run through all this. If you don't know the specific parameters, we have parameters to assume: 0.8 for fracture gradient, 1.2 for specific gravity. Use your TVD. However, you can really, the only thing you can, I shouldn't say the only thing you can change in here is if you have additional information about your fracture pressure gradient. So if you have an ISIP or a step rate test, you could potentially deviate that then from your 0.8. Another thing we did get from the EPA was the field rules that they've worked off of for fracture pressure gradient, where there's field rules where you basically are either above a significant deviation above 0.8 or below 0.8. And again, we have the permitted maximum injection pressures as well. .808 is MIT's before existing wells, so operational testing requirements, and this is not different significantly. And MIT is required at least every 5 years. If you are going along and you have mechanical integrity, you're still required to do a test every 5 years, including wells with TA status. And this is one to kind of go back a couple slides. You'll have an authorization to inject because you haven't lost mechanical integrity. If you do your test and you have a successful test, you'll still submit the data within 14 days, but you're not going to be waiting on an authorization to inject letter because you already have it. The cease injection comes when if you've lost mechanical integrity and you shut your well in. So you just continue on with operation of the well. Again, that's the same as you're accustomed to now. This is just a hair different from what folks might be used to now. So if a Class II well has not been utilized for its intended purpose for a period of greater than 2 years, prior to resuming injection, you need to have a successful MIT and an authorization to inject. The EPA had, if you had a 2 years, like a TA, 2-year TA, it was every 2 years, no matter what. In this case, it's before you bring it back online. So again, we see a few slight differences, but I'd say very, very similar across the board, which is what you would expect. 810 and 811, monitoring and filing records and reports and loss of mechanical integrity. Again, I have done a lot of reading at you so far. I apologize for that. These I put into some tables. These tables are also in the MyStar guide and are out there. So if you're furiously writing, hopefully no one is furiously writing. If you are, we'll have this recording out there afterwards. We'll get some slides out there afterwards. We'll talk about the website and what's available on that already. But so again, I did my best here to distill down the rules into a couple tables. So all things that are required and all things that will be submitted through MyStar. So if you have an injection well and it's not used for secondary recovery, you can do weekly recording and monthly reporting, and those monthly reports are due by the end of the following month. If you have injection data for a secondary recovery well, you will do monthly recording with annual reporting by March 1 of each year for the previous year. If you're a commercial disposal well, we'll have a list of sources quarterly due within 45 days after the end of each quarter. And a new source, anytime a new source is added, and you'll need supervisor approval prior to injection of fluids from that source, and you'll get approval in the form of a letter. So again, you've already been submitting injection data. These aren't new provisions. It's just the methodology of how they come in will be a little bit different. You have an annual inject date analysis. You can guess that frequency is at least annually by March 1 of each year for the previous year, but that could happen more frequently. If you have a change in sources or characteristics of inject date, you'll need to let us know. You'll need to have an analysis and let us know within 30 days. These are two, we actually have a specific spot on an EDD, so I'm jumping ahead a little, but an electronic data deliverable. There's a specific spot on the injection reports where you can put these. If you have a maximum injection pressure exceedance or any other noteworthy anomalies or problems, every time we need to know, and you can let us know on the next injection report or on any submitted report or we even have an other documents portion of MiSTAR where like your inject data analysis is made to come in, we can be notified through there as well. If that's something that we need to know, you don't have to wait until your next monitoring report to let us know. By no means, you can just let us know right through there. And that would be fine. That would be great. Pardon me. And I guess finally, for MITs and a QA, but MITs, we've talked about it in 806 and 808, at least every 5 years. Need to let us know at least 5 days, preferably longer, ahead of time. That's why I said you're encouraged to schedule in advance if you can. We'll need to know the results of the MIT after every MIT, pass or fail, within 14 days after the test. Loss of mechanical integrity after every loss, within a notification, at least a verbal, within 24 hours and a written within 5 days. If you can do all of this again through MiSTAR, and if you do that notification straight away, that serves for both. So if you know you can fill it out, click. I lost mechanical integrity on this well, shut in, send it off, and that'll serve as both. It's kind of a special note because again, Part 8, if you recall way back to that slide, these are rules for injection wells, not for for objection wells, not for only Class II wells. So this is more of a gas storage, but I suppose it could be related to anyone. If you find a logging related loss of mechanical integrity, you have a little longer to notify because that log is run, and then you need to get the results of the log, and then you need to review the results of the log and determine that mechanical integrity is lost, and let us know about it. Finally, again, broken record. You are already doing this. You're reporting quarterly annual fill data to the EPA, but you're not. Has not been required to be reported to the state of Michigan. However, it will be now. So we'll have that'll be again your quarterly fill will be reported quarterly, due within 45 days after the end of each quarter, and not for rule authorized wells. Again, you're doing this for the EPA. And instead you'll be doing it through MiSTAR for the state of Michigan. All right, we're getting there. So if you remember, we started at 814, we're back around through 812, and then we'll move on to MiSTAR. So again, if you say, boy, I knew all this, well, I'm very happy. That would be a great outcome. So one couple more, and then we'll move on. So cessation of injection wells or request for TA status. See right down here, we talk about how this supersedes 209. This is really the equivalent of plug or produce. So if an injection well ceases operating for the purpose which it was intended for a year, then you either need to plug the well or request TA status in writing. And that TA status is pursuant to Rule 511. And it can be granted if the supervisor determines waste will be prevented. However, there might be some special provisions with that. And if TA status is not granted, the permittee shall plug the well, pardon me. But you can petition the supervisor for a hearing to show cause as to why that well shouldn't be plugged. And finally, I have two slides on this, and then we'll be out of the rules. Suspension of Class II operations if they're due to threat to public health and safety or underground sources of drinking water. Again, kind of what the whole program is built on. So if there is an occurrence where there's a threat to public health or safety or underground sources of drinking water, you can immediately require corrective action, including suspending any of all components of injection or disposal operations. If the supervisor determines that they're in violation of the provisions of the Act, these rules, permit conditions, instructions, or orders, or it threatens public health, safety, or underground sources of drinking water. Apologies for reading, but those conditions are, I think, rather important. And this then, the rest of the rule goes through how to, what happens after that. So you can be suspended up to 5 days. That can then be extended up to 21 days unless everything's brought into compliance. Otherwise, there's multiple ways to go into an administrative consent agreement or other binding instrument to make sure that corrective actions happen within a specified period of time. And then much like we've talked about in 806, 808, the reporting table, you can't even if those conditions are met, you still need a successful MIT and an authorization to inject. Again, if you were under this, you would get a cease injection letter straight away. So we can take a breath. Those are all the rules for part 8. I know that's potentially a little bit dry, but I want to make sure that we're all on the same page starting out. What's new, what's changed. Again, pointing out what's very similar to the EPA. One might be just a shade, just a slight bit different. Some of the timelines are just slightly different. So I want to make sure that we're all on the same page as to what needs to be reported and when and how. So this is the how. So Adam talked about it. I talked about it. It's in the title of all these sessions, MiSTAR. We're calling it Michigan's State Tracking and Reporting. Personally, I like the apostrophe S, so it's not confused with it coming from Michigan State. And that's not just because I'm a grad. But this has been a joint effort as well. The whole thing, again, Primacy, MiSTAR, there's a lot of people involved. Again, this is the Groundwater Protection Council, Michigan Department of Technology Management Budget, Eagle OGMD. I will venture out just on a small ledge here, and Kerry Johnson worked on this extensively. Larry Organic worked on this absolutely extensively. I got to come in kind of when it was really formed and see the product and do testing and work through it, but I can't claim that I was able to, it was already almost getting ready to go when I got on board. So I can't claim a whole lot of laying the groundwork for it, but there have been a lot of people involved in this. I just wanted to highlight a few of the groups and a couple of the people. So I think an important step back is it's been talked about a little bit, kind of what is this actually for? So MiSTAR allows operators to submit and fulfill all the regulatory reporting requirements for Class II injection wells. So that whole table, three tables, 3 slides worth of tables, all that reporting can come in through MiSTAR. And again, why was this undertaken? Well, you can imagine with 1,200 or so injection wells, monthly reports, quarterly reports, annual reports, it would be thousands upon thousands upon thousands of pieces of paper. And pieces of paper are great, but they can be misplaced. They can be hard to track. If someone didn't enter something, you can transpose things. There's a lot of, I'd say there's a lot of errors that can occur with pieces of paper as well. So this is a way for all that paper to come in electronically and for operators and the state to be looking at the same thing. We both have a window into this and can see what was submitted and when. It'll have a timestamp. There won't be any questions if something was on time or not on time. And it will house data. So if someone's, hey, did that get sent in? So-and-so went on vacation. Did they send that in before they went off? You can go right on and see, yep, that got in. It's there, no problem. You don't need to resubmit. Or if you do try and resubmit it, MiSTAR will tell you, hey, this is a duplicate. You've already submitted this. And there are 2 phases to this. So again, what we're talking about is all those previous slide tables to talk about injection reporting. So all your injection requirements can come in through MiSTAR in phase 1. Phase 2, it's being worked on right now, and we'll roll out production reporting for MiSTAR. Again, I'm not trying to put paper down, but paperless is really the way things are going. It's just easier to track. It's easier to provide compliance assistance, and it's easier to keep, in my opinion, to keep up on everything and not spend a ton of time doing manual data entry. So there are a few requirements to actually use MiSTAR that you will have to go out and grab and submit before we can open up the system. So that's, again, another reason why we tried to, I know these probably weren't the two greatest times in the world for everyone, but trying to get the OGMD side of this, get in with, get the ability to do this presentation and get it all done before the 29th with a 30-day heads up. These are the time slots that worked, and that's why we're recording it, and that's why we'll have everything out there for people to grab. I did want to mention, if anyone was joining from a non-Eastern time zone, I do appreciate it. I apologize that it's early. I've lived that life. I frequently had 6 a.m. meetings because I was working off time zone for a little bit. So four things you really need. A signed and submitted letter of assurance, and this is very likely the first time you've heard that terminology, so we'll talk about really what that means. This is not new, but the form has been recently revised just in May to include a MiSTAR component. So we'll need a new well permittee organizational report. Because it is electronic, you will need a computer with internet access and a modern browser. That's spelled out on the next slide. You need to be able to create CSV or XLS or XLSX files. This isn't an endorsement of Excel. If I refer to it as Excel or an Excel file, what I really mean is a spreadsheet. I'm well aware there's many programs that are out there at no cost that you can read and create that file type, but I'm typically used to doing it in Excel. So if I slip and say an Excel file, what I really mean is a spreadsheet. So to go back to the top of this list, what is a signed and submitted letter of assurance? The letter of assurance we'll look at on the next slide. And it pretty much says that my company, this is supposed to be signed by basically the company, the principal of the company, saying, hey, my company will use MiSTAR to submit our regulatory requirements for injection wells. And it does define that there will be a small overlap period where you'll submit quote unquote paper and the digital submission. So we want to make sure that as we launch this and as we get going, that what's being submitted in the standard way per that 2019 letter matches what's in MiSTAR, and that way we can suss out kind of if people are having problems or putting things in the wrong field, and where to advise and guide folks. So we want to make sure that everything's going in, and then you'll get in. I'm sure everybody will very quickly get an A-OK. Hey, you're using this perfectly. Please just report through MiSTAR from now on. We'll also take a quick look at the permittee organizational report, which now has a MiSTAR field, which will be applicable for injection and production. And we don't need to talk about the other 2 bullet points. So this is the letter of assurance. I will spare you. I will not read this whole thing to you, but it's one page letter outlining essentially what the requirements I talked about before. So computer with internet browsers, trial period, just to make sure you're submitting both types of reports, and that you need to fill this out, as well as the well permittee report. And this certification pretty much says that you will use MiSTAR, and this is a certification that you've allowed your company to do it, and that the representatives of your company are reporting on your behalf. This is a one-time deal. Ideally, it's a one-time deal unless the person who signs this letter changes or leaves the company. Then you'll need to have a new letter of assurance, because we want to have this updated to basically the principal of the company. This one, however, so this should look reasonably familiar to folks. EQP 7200-13, revised in May. To both be a fillable PDF and to have, as I call out on the right-hand side here, electronic submittal e-forms and MiSTAR for employees or agents. And this is going to serve a number of different purposes. One, each username and password for MiSTAR will be unique. So if you have three people, let's just for the sake of argument call it 3 employees listed here who have access to it, they'll all get their own username and password, and those should not be shared. And if that person leaves, you don't just say, oh, the new person, they'll use the previous person's credentials. No, just resubmit a new one. We'll remove access from the previous person and submit access to the new person. Secondly, this email address part of it will be very important, at least to me it will, so that we have a list, an easy email list of MiSTAR users so that we can quickly reach out to people if there's a question that keeps coming up, if there's a planned or unplanned outage that we can let people know, hey, we're going to revise X, Y, and Z on MiSTAR. It's going to happen on this date from this time to this time. Please don't use MiSTAR during those dates. It will be unavailable. That's something, you know, if I were a user of the system from the outside, I would very much want to know about that. And I can tell you from trying to get the notification out on this training, you know, we didn't necessarily have perfect email address and updated contacts of everybody. So I do apologize for missing some folks along the way. And again, this recording will be out there, and we can also do another one of these if there's demand for it. So this will serve several purposes. And again, this will need to be resubmitted basically anytime you have a changeover in who's using MiSTAR. One more point on this, MiSTAR keys off of the operator of the well. So if you sell your well, you very much need to let us know so we can get that working in lockstep so that the new owner of the well, as approved, will be able to submit reports through MiSTAR. So if you have that going ahead of the other, then you know you might not be able to submit reports for it right away. So we want to make sure that's something to be aware of. Okay, so this is hot off the presses. Again, a website that I would say people are probably familiar with. If you haven't been out to our website, there's been recent updates to what the kind of the look and feel of it, but the content remains the same now with some updated underground injection control content on there. I sent you out just to kind of the main oil and gas page. Under general information, we're going to have this underground injection control page. I believe this primacy application information portion of it won't be there. Again, if you want to go look at you know, public notice, we'll have under this well applications and permits, it'll be out there. So kind of look under this section for changes, updates, information that you're looking for. So I didn't want to put the link out here on this. Again, in case you're furiously writing, because the title of that'll change. So I didn't want to actually just send a broken link straight away. But on that web page, which I do have to I owe a debt of gratitude to Mark Snow and Trisha Hagerman for getting this up and going on very, very short notice. It's got some background information on electronic filing in Class II wells. It's got my contact information. You can find everyone else's contact information if you need them. And on the bottom portion of that page, you will find links to the letter of assurance and the well permittee organizational report. So you can go out right after this session if you choose, go grab those, read them over and submit those. And we can get you up and running with MiSTAR quite quickly. We do also have some information about the MiSTAR system. So how to access it. There's a link out here that you will, once you get your username and password, it would be good to bookmark that page and then go in and log on through there. We do have a draft version here, or the first version of our user guide. which is, I'm going to run through a very condensed version of that tomorrow. So the click by click, again, how do I know what I need to do. I've read it in the rules. How do I take that and put it into MiSTAR so that I'm meeting my requirements? And we seeded a class 2 frequently asked questions. I'm expecting, I see one up there, but I'm a little afraid. I'm not sure. I don't want to click it and take away from the PowerPoint here. So we'll answer the questions here at the end. I think should be wrapped here in the not too distant future, and we'll have some room for questions. But we seeded that with regulatory requirements. And then we'll take questions from this session, questions that people email in, and that'll just be kind of an evergreen document. Because there's stuff that we're thinking about, but I'm sure there'll be questions that come up. And I mean, if you have a question, probably someone else has it too. And I think it's worthwhile not just replying to that, say single person or single operator, but if we think it's a question people will have, appending it onto the frequently asked questions. So that one could change and be added on to potentially from time to time. And again, that's one, if we have that listserv, we could say, hey, FAQs are updated as of this date. Okay, so we're kind of coming to a close, but I wanted to give folks a little bit of a taste for MiSTAR. You've been very patient coming in through the rules, the background, what's going to change, what's the same. Now let's talk a little bit about MiSTAR. So EDD, if you hear me talk, I jumped the gun earlier and said EDD, electronic data deliverable. These are templates. These are typically spreadsheet-based templates. And those will be for the monthly or annual injection well operating report. This is the form. If there's a form that it's replacing, the form will be called out here. And then the rules that are applicable to that are called out. So if you have any questions about the reporting requirements or any confusion, you can refer back to the table, refer back to the rules. Same with the standard annular pressure test. This EQP 7606 will be replaced by the MiSTAR EDD for standard annular pressure test, again, for new wells and existing wells. We didn't previously receive quarterly annulus fill reports, but we will have those coming in through MiSTAR on a template-based EDD. Again, there's the rule 80107. And we'll have your notifications, either notification for loss of mechanical integrity. These kind of twin together. Notification of loss of mechanical integrity and scheduling a mechanical integrity test. There's a notifications EDD, and there's basically two choices, and you can choose loss of mechanical integrity or scheduling a mechanical integrity test. Again, fill it out in typically spreadsheet format and submit that in through the system. So we have really, even though it lists 5 things, really 4 different EDDs that are specifically for the class 2 reporting requirements. There are also some other EDDs on there that are not specific to the reporting requirements, but there's an AOR tool, there's a directional survey tool, and I'm not going to get into depth in that today. But I put this together and I understand completely this is small font, hard to read. It's not meant to read. It's really meant to just show what we did or what was done. And it's taking this form for a standard annular pressure test and converting it to kind of a spreadsheet format. And I've called out, again, you can look at this on the side, but if you want, it's just translating this form into essentially a columnar format. And I've called out what's what here. And really the only real differences are on the top, on the very top of this. So on this form, you'd fill in your permit number. MiSTAR is all keyed off of API numbers, which is maybe a little bit different. There's a way in MiSTAR to go download, say, show me all the wellbores for my company, and it'll give you a list of the wellbores, the APIs, the common name, all the relevant information about those wells if you don't have that readily offhand. But when you fill in that API number, it tells us where that well is. So you don't necessarily have to put in all the rest of this information. And then from basically well type all the way down and even a free form part for comments, it's all just forms in the field or fields in the form. So if you can fill this out, you can fill this out. I have no doubt about it. So this is basically the well or the EDD header, and then the EDD data portion of it. So then you would, this actually looks quite familiar. Time annulus tubing, needs to be military time. There's rules around each one of these validation criteria, and it applies to the previous slide as well. And you just fill in your real data along with your header info and submit it through the system. So again, it is a new system, but it's a new system basically taking the same data you're already reporting and just putting it in a different way. There are also other documents. So we talked about those in the reporting table. If you have an annual injected analysis, well, you're not going to want to type in every single analyte into a spreadsheet format. So we will happily take that as an accepted format. And really they can't be larger than 20 megabytes, I believe. But a PDF of this would be great. It can come in through this other documents. So where things were not feasible, you put it in, you say these are the wells it's for, and you submit it through, and we'll have that. And that applies for the injected analysis, other injected analysis, so annual, or if you update or change sources, MIT gauge records, the chart, commercial sources quarterly, and commercial sources new. So we have a place and a home for all the regulatory requirements. And this is my last slide. Again, I wanted to make sure we had some room for questions, room for anything that might take a little bit of additional time. I thought it was too much to put this and the click by click all in one. But this is kind of the look and feel of it, and it will actually change mostly colors related to an ADA update that we're going to be having here pretty shortly. But things will mostly be the same. So under those electronic data deliverables, you can go submit an EDD, and that'll pull from the 2 slides ago. You can pull down, download one of those 4 sheets, fill it out, and upload it again. One of the big advantages, in my opinion, that Adam was talking about in the beginning, if you have 1 well, there's 2 ways you can do it. If you have 100 wells, there's several EDDs where you can submit all your well data on 1 sheet. So instead of submitting 100 EDDs, you can submit 1 EDD with 100 wells on it. So I think that is advantageous. You have 1 form, everything's neat and tidy in 1 place. If you choose to do it that way, potentially there's ways to pull that from an internal database and automate it over to fill out columns. If you want to know what's out there, again, did that actually go through? I saw it, it kind of went through, I don't know. You can view EDDs and double check what's been submitted for an operator well. There's a lot of filtering and sorting criteria you can do here. UIC wellbores is exactly what it says. You can see a wellbore and its data. So you can take that list and filter it. Again, I have a recommendation tomorrow to go in and filter that by operator and download that list. And that'll give you your well, your API, your relevant information. And you can cross-check that with your company's list and make sure that they match up. You can also say, oh, you know, on a particular well, I want to know some piece of information. I want to see the last 3 months of injection reports. They'll be in that individual well. I want to know the last MIT date. It'll be in that well, or the last MIT submitted. I've misplaced my own internal record. You can go see it there. Documents, what I referred to as other documents on the last couple slides, that's where you'd submit and view, again, your inject data analysis or other such other document. You say, this is a document, you select the well or wells that it goes with, and you put it in. Again, I only kind of alluded to this, but there's an AOR tool to define a map-based tool to define wells and features within an area of interest, or pardon me, an area of review from our Rbdms database. You can go in and view your well notifications. Those are loss of mechanical integrity or notice of mechanical integrity test. And this one you can just thoroughly ignore. So, but it is important, and I think it's worth concluding on. As Adam mentioned, going from dual reporting and dual regulation to, the state of Michigan having primacy, but then we are also going to be overseen and audited by the EPA, and we have certain requirements to them, specifically the 7520 report regarding potentially all of our Class II information. So that's how we're going to manage this. And that's why digital reporting and electronic reporting, another reason it's so important is it's just will be much, much easier to track and keep track of. So with that, you've heard me talking now for, an hour plus. So I really, for those that have hung in, I really appreciate your time and attention. Again, we're here for questions, and that doesn't end at the end of this session. If there are questions that come up after the fact, shoot us an email, give me a call, we can work through it. And if it's something that we think many people have, we'll put it in that frequently asked questions sheet so that everyone has access to the answers. Like I said, this is a little bit new and a little bit different just in the way things are reported. The requirements and regulatory requirements are not new. This is stuff that operators have been doing for us and for the EPA. It's just a slightly different way of getting that information to us and in the system. So with that, I am out of slides, thankfully, until tomorrow. So I think this is a good time if we have some questions. I see one up here. I'm going to stop sharing for a moment, I think, so that I can access that without everyone watching over it.
Yeah, and I'm going to just share our screen again and remind people how they can submit a question. You can do that using the QA box located on your Zoom toolbar. You can use the raised hand icon and we will unmute your mic. You can ask that question in person. And if you're on the phone, and it looks like we do have an individual on the phone, you can hit #2 if you would like to ask a question live, and we will unmute your mic. So there is a question in the hopper. It looks like Adam is going to address this live. I'm just going to read the question for the benefit of the attendees here. And it says, if I understand Jason correctly, we are required to update the letter of assurance if the original president or vice president who signed leaves the company and/or the role. Leaders can often leave without notice. Is there a time frame by which this must be addressed?
So we don't have a regulatory time frame that I'm aware of for updating those things. I think the intent is that you submit those ASAP. We do understand that things turn over within companies pretty rapidly, and it's been a challenge, historically to keep org charts updated. We realize that corporate structures change. I think one thing that is very important is that you recognize that the org chart and approved submitters is very important to keep updated with us moving forward, particularly those approved submitters. The people that you want working in the MiSTAR system, they'll receive unique login and password information that's not to be shared. That's akin to their wet signature on a document. So it's important that you let us know when those people move on, so their permissions could be deactivated and not associated with your company anymore. And likewise, if you have somebody coming on that's going to be submitting them, again, they are not to use anybody else's login information. And we want to get them the org chart updated and get that proper documentation in place with their unique sign-on.
Next question is, can we get a copy of this presentation? And I believe, Jason, you'd indicated this is going to be posted out on your website.
Yep, we'll get both. I think we'll get both the recording as well as I'll PDF out the slides for day 1 and day 2, so that if you don't want to hear my commentary over it. You can view it and then skip forward to, if you're interested, what was actually said about that one.
Okay, next question. Will we need to retain the $25,000 bond per injection well with EPA?
You do not. You have to be, this is state program 615, so you need appropriate 615 bonding. If you do not have currently full 615 bonding in place with Michigan, then what is it, Jason? They have 60 days or 30 days?
30 days, yes.
30 days to get those bonds in place with us.
Okay, next question. If we have a pending transfer for a Michigan injection well and it hasn't been approved by the EPA, should I resubmit transfer to Eagle or wait until the 30th?
There's not any action necessary on your part. Jason could put more on this, but basically if you have a permit already in place with us and you're still working on one with the EPA, you're done. You're regulated under primacy next week on the 29th. You're all set, and that application that you have pending with EPA can basically die. If you have an application in there and you've not yet applied with us, then we think there may be a half a dozen or less of those that are actually out there, then you will need to resubmit with us and get going under our new full rule application 802, 801, 802, 803 process.
Well, that's all the questions we currently have in the hopper, and I just want to remind attendees that we'll do a follow-up email, and that'll have the link to the recording, and we'll provide Jason and team a list of those that were registered for this event. In the absence of questions, do either of you two have some final thoughts? Oh, we do have a hand raised. Well, let's try that. Okay. Mark, you should start to be able to unmute your mic now, if you can try that.
Okay, can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Okay, one of the questions I have is regarding contacting operators such as myself. A lot of people may not have heard about this. I talked to 3 other operators and 2 of the 3 hadn't heard about this, either the changeover or the training here on the internet. And I'm guessing that they probably signed up in time this morning, but I think even though paper is regarded as old school, it might be a good idea to do a hard copy issuance of the notification and set up another training session for people that didn't hear about it, so that they can get up to speed and comply with everything. It's pretty short notice.
It is short notice. I apologize, Mark. We took out that notice in the oil and gas news, and I tried to send out an email blast to Class II operators, and I'll admit we got some that were kicked back. So I appreciate you talking with folks and getting on here. And you bring up a very good point that I had in my notes, and I neglected to mention that there will also be a hard copy paper letter to operators defining these requirements as well. And that's why the recording was made and will be out there for people, as well as the slides. And like I said, if there's been too many folks who are saying, hey, I need this, I'm happy to do another session or sessions. That's totally fine. Or we can do just individual ones as needed based on demand and specific questions. So, it's the kind of thing where we can handle that by exception, but I appreciate you making the effort to go out and get it. And yes, there will be a paper letter to operators as well.
I would just add to Jason and remind everybody, Mark, I like that picture of that German Shepherd. Mine's laying around here somewhere. The notification that we had that this thing was really moving happened in a span of about 4 or 5 days, that it seemed like a Federal Register posting was imminent, that the administrator had signed off on the thing, and that they were at the Federal Register. So we kind of had a 30+30 kind of timeline in mind, because we thought maybe that would be like 3-4 weeks out for a federal posting. And then within a matter of days, we realized that they were going to be putting that in the Federal Register that week. And so we truly had a +30 timeline, and the team's been scrambling to build a listserv. We know there's about 90 companies out there that operate at least one well, and we did our level best to pull emails associated with those things together. It's going to be important. That's another reason for the importance of keeping org charts and contact lists up, is so that we have a good listserv to blast things out. So we did rely a little bit on Oil and Gas News, just because they had a pretty wide readership. But over time, we'll improve the communication, being able to shoot out paper copies to companies, and hopefully continue to blast things out by email, because there's going to be compliance assistance. We want to help companies comply, and pushing out information is going to be an important part of that. But this meeting wasn't required. This is strictly in the vein of compliance assistance, to try and realize that this thing came at us fast and furious, and just sort of getting industry and even our team, to the extent, back refreshed on all these rules.
Okay, thanks for your question, Mark. We've got a couple more in the hopper. And this first one is, will Eagle or EPA process BOD transfers and or refunds when fully bonded?
I think that's bond. Yeah. So EPA will be releasing any bonds that are required to be released on their side, and you will work with our specialist and UIC team, as you would normally, to put any required bonds in place on the 615 side.
Okay, next question, probably an early question. How much of the MiSTAR data entry will have to be duplicated in the Rbdms field notes?
That sounds like somebody from our team, and I think you're going to do your field notes with your collector app, and then also through the UIC system. I mean, the field notes, or the inspections module, is Rbdms is the system of record on that. Carrie or Mark or Jason can correct me if I'm wrong there.
Well, that does bring us to a close in the questions that we had in the hopper. So any kind of final thoughts before we close out this session?
I'll leave Adam to the final, but I'll take penultimate if I can, and just say thank you to those who are attending, and stay tuned if you're interested in the click by click, how you submit things to MyStar tomorrow, and just appreciate the time and attention. Thank you.
Yeah, I guess my final comments is just a thank you to everybody that may be on the line, whether you're an NGO, a tribe, a company, whoever it is, folks from our team. This is an incredibly large lift, and it's made us better, and appreciate the EPA team working alongside us for basically 40 years. The Safe Drinking Water Act always anticipated states could apply for primacy if they wish to do so. So I think this is a very exciting day for Michigan to be regulating our own home turf, and we'll continue to look forward to working with EPA, just in a slightly different relationship.
All right, well, thank you both, Adam and Jason, and to our attendees, we hope to see you tomorrow for part 2 of this training session. It starts at 1 o'clock. And like I said, there will also be a follow-up from this webinar with some additional contact information, website link, and the recording. So appreciate your time and enjoy the rest of your day.